It all began late the night before, as we packed the backpack and double-checked everything we could think of to prepare for the early morning start to our epic ride. Contingency the day before the race is all done, which is a lot like a parade, allowing spectators to get up close to all the drivers and vehicles as they make their way through all the vehicle and equipment checks. Contingency starts with a check sheet of all the products that helped you set up your vehicle, any necessary aftermarket parts and add-ons. For me, I included IMS for the fuel tank, Lectron for the carburetor, Baja Designs for the headlight, Michelin for the tires and moose inserts. Moose inserts are a tube replacement system that uses a nitrogen-filled foam tube that is squeezed in place of the tube so you don't get any flat tires. I also included Flatland Racing for the beefy front disc guard and Knight Rider for the flashing blue light on the backpack. The bike is also fitted with a Moose Racing skid plate. As you make your way to the lineup, one of the popular things for the Baja races is for the kids to be asking for stickers. So we made sure to get a whole bunch of stickers made up that show where we came from. Our race number and our little team logo we made for the trip, Alberta to Baja. Our first check we go through is our transponder check, which is under the large metal structure, which is the official start and stop of the timer overall. Once you go through there, you are in line for your one-on-one interview up on the stage. Every single driver gets their own interview, which is live streamed so people back home can watch your interview. They make sure to ask you who your sponsors are, so you have airtime to thank those that helped you get to the race. My sponsors were Catquistone, LaFleur Cabinets, CanWest Tax, Sweet Legs, Playfair Athletics, Terrell Electric, and Bearcom Grand Prairie. I made sure to point out the ice racing series I was a part of at the time of preparing to go to Baja. I was racing the DRZ 400 in the Studs on Ice racing series with Wapiti Off-Road. I also made sure to thank all the friends and family back home that really made this possible. I had many people donate large amounts of money to make this possible, especially my parents. We raised enough money from business sponsorship and personal family and friends to cover fuel and hotels for the entire trip there and back. We could not be more grateful. After we get through the interview, we head down the ramp and stop in for our Stella device hookup. Before we left, we had purchased our installation kit and got the radio, iridium, and GPS antennas installed. The install of the Stella went very smooth for both of us. The installation Brandon did of the wiring was flawless, which was very nice since we rode the bikes pretty hard during pre-running, and the wiring and antennas kept intact quite well. The Stella device has a few functions. First, for the race organizers, it has the ability to see where we are on the course. It relays our location to make sure we hit all of the virtual checkpoints. It gives an audible 2 beeps when we hit the checkpoint, and we then know we can keep going. Our main rules with navigation are to hit the checkpoint and don't go backwards on the course. Otherwise, we can vary our route somewhat between checkpoints, choosing the faster route. We also have the entire course downloaded onto our personal GPS, which allows us to see each virtual checkpoint, so we know when we can deviate. The Stella device also has the ability to communicate with the organizers. If we have a breakdown, we are out of the race. We can output a caution, and all upcoming vehicles will know to keep lookout for a broken down vehicle. We can also send out an SOS for an emergency, and medical help can be sent out right away. Along with that, the Stella has a pass button when approaching a slower vehicle. The bikes being much slower than most vehicles, the device is usually used by others to notify the bikes of them approaching. When they press pass on the Stella, it has a very noticeable rapid beeping as well as flashing blue flag on the device, and that gives you a limited time to dart out of the way before the vehicle gets right up behind you. The last stage of contingency was motorcycle inspection and safety inspection of the helmets, riding gear, and backpack, which we had to show having the emergency kit, water bladder, working blinking blue safety light, and we also carried satellite phones. Last thing to do was to get a rider profile picture taken, and then we headed back to our villa to finish packing our meals for the Baja Pits pit stops. Baja Pits is an excellent service you can pay for, and they will refuel you, and if you drop off drinks and food in a bag marked with your number, they will bring them around to each pit, so you can get what you need on the course. They did an absolutely outstanding job, very professional. At each pit, they had my bag ready, and I didn't have to say a word. They just offered it all out, and any garbage they grabbed from me, I just fired up and took off. The bike I was riding performed flawlessly on race day. I did not have one issue with it overheating, starting funny, or performing off. It was absolutely beautiful how well it performed. The race prep was somewhat last minute for a trip of this caliber. I managed to go purchase a used motorbike west of Rocky Mountain House, Alberta. I bought a 2007 Honda CRF 450X. This generation of the 450X is very well known in Baja for being a reliable winning platform. It had very low hours, but the price was reflective of how well it was taken care of. I purchased the bike for $5,500, and after that, probably put another $6,000 into it, if I had to guess. The atmosphere started to get very electric that night, and people all around us started to party. The villas we were staying at had people from all over North America and would stop in and chat as they walked by while we were getting ready. The villa was also across the street from a large dune known for sand drag racing, and everyone was out putting the hammer down up all over the dune all night. The atmosphere was perfect for the event and to keep our nerves up for the task ahead. Once we did our last checks on the bike and gear, we headed to the main promenade and took in some of the local street vendors and live music. The messages started to come in all evening, especially after the interview, from family and friends back home talking about how nice it was to watch the interview live streamed on YouTube. Those messages kept coming all the way until bedtime to make sure I ride safe and get some good rest before tomorrow's ride. I stayed up messaging and tried my best to fall asleep, but the rest was very short. 4 a.m. came very quick. We got up around 4:30 and started to gear up and have some quick snacks before heading to the start line. The nerves were in full control now, as we could hear bikes and quads starting up all over town, warming up in the dark morning over the coast. We got everything lined up and headed down for the start line. The start line ran opposite of the direction of contingency, and as we pulled in, they slowly sorted us by category. The first groups to take off were the Pro Moto Unlimited teams. They were the fastest and best riders in teams of usually 4. Following that was the Pro Moto age categories, 30 plus, 40 plus, and 50 plus. Next was the Pro Moto Limited, followed by our category, Ironman. The Ironman category is the most talked about category after the pro teams, due to the fact that the Ironman category is a solo attempt, one rider on one bike, trying to marathon the entire race in one go. The Baja 1000 is one of the most well-known off-road motorcycle races on the planet, nearly up there with Dakar. The Ironman riders are often known for having to find true grit to manage to keep going hour after hour in all manners of terrain and temperatures. The Baja 1000 is known for icy cold nights, often down to freezing, as well as super hot days going up to the 30s. Rides in that race can often last 30 hours or more for the Ironman riders. The entire World Desert Racing Championship consists of 4 races. The first one being the one me and Brandon raced in, the San Felipe 250, followed by the Baja 500, Baja 400, and finished with the Baja 1000. After the Ironman riders, the last moto categories were the Sportsman and the 60-plus Legends category, which included a team that Jim O'Neill was racing on. Then following the motos with the early morning start is the Quads category, which is lined up very similar to the motos. The first rider of the day was the previous winning team in Pro Moto with the 1X number plate. They took off right when 6 a.m. hit, and every rider was a minute behind them for the Pro category. Once they got to the age categories, the times were staggered by 30 seconds. It was a long wait from hearing the first bike take off to waiting for my name to appear on the paddock and watch the countdown for me to take off. I was lined up in front of Brandon, and our tentative plan was to ride together. But knowing the nerves would be there, along with the crowds of people on all sides leaving town, I told him I would be riding at a decent pace until I got a little ways out of town. Once things appeared quieter, I would pull over and wait for him to catch up, and we would be on our way together. As I pulled up to the line, the large clock up top was counting down, and the flags were held in my way, my name flashing on the sign. 3, 2, 1. Flags are raised, and I could finally feel the early morning chill as I left the lights. Once I took off, it was a very surreal experience right away as I headed through town and watched the crowds gathered already to see the early morning riders take off. The course wound its way right past our villa and along in front of the big sand dune, then under the highway and off into the desert. The sun was just starting to poke up about 6:15, so it was up nearly as soon as we took off from the line. The entire atmosphere of the early start just added to the feel of the ride as we took off. The cool air and the sideways sun off the coast. Crowds lined up on both sides, cheering on all the riders. The crowds, I couldn't believe the crowds. They were lined up on both sides for so much of the 400-kilometer long course, usually centered right around San Felipe, but you could find crowds of campers way out in the back part of the course, finding their own little oasis of tents and coolers to watch the racers. After I was out in a little bit of a clearing from spectators, I pulled over to wait for Brandon. I pulled over for 1 minute, and as soon as 1 minute hit, my Stella asked me if everything was okay. It spooked me, so I took off again. Went about 2 minutes down and pulled over again for another minute. Still no one. So I took off again and rode for about 5 minutes. Then I pulled over one more time and waited for a good couple minutes. After that, I made the decision to just keep riding. Adrenaline was pumping hard, and I knew I couldn't just wait and wait without knowing exactly what happened to him. So off I went, and my marathon was truly underway. The race was going to be ran very cautious for me, as my only goal was to finish the Ironman race. I know I'm not on the level of other riders, and just finishing a race this dangerous is a feat in itself. Only a couple months after this race, the winner of this race, Giovanni Zunino of Argentina, was pre-running the Baja 500 and crashed and died. It's no light task. I met up with a many times Baja champion, Colton Udell. He mentioned how it's not just surviving the race, but surviving the entire week of pre-running on top of the race. Anything can happen. I met with Colton in Southern California at his ranch to look over the bike with the concerns I had with Electron carb. Me and Brandon got a first-hand experience of how easily accidents can happen. We felt it when we left our first day of pre-running. Brandon crashed 30 feet from the truck on our first ride, right as we took off. Just a fluke. Tire hit a rut rut odd and launched him hard over the bars. He lost his GoPro and was shaken up, but otherwise fine. The start of the race was a good lesson in keeping my cool. There were spectators cheering us on from the start line to the second checkpoint 150 kilometers away. So I had to manage my endurance and not get too caught up in the push the crowd gives you, which is a fine balance. They really help you get through the race, but you gotta maintain what your body is capable of at the same time. I got passed right away by many motorcycles and ATVs. The ATVs with their large rear tires spit up lots of large rocks as they fly past. It was also very dusty as everyone would pass. The morning light would shine very strong in the dust and would make it impossible to ride at a quick pace until the dust settled. There is a very famous section of the course in the San Felipe 250 called Zoo Road. It's a long, very straight, very whooped out road that is famous for watching the trophy trucks go flat out and see their suspension go through its 3-foot stroke. So it was lined with spectators non-stop for a good 20 to 40 kilometers. They all had their tents up and some were camped out waiting. It was still early for them, about 7 a.m., but they still gave a good cheer to the bikes. The trucks wouldn't start until 9 a.m. Something I came to find out real quick is to use caution every time you see a large group of people in an area, or lots of young people. There is often a large bedded rock or another similar obstacle that can catch a rider off guard, so everyone is crowded around ready for the carnage. The first Baja pit stop was at mile 40 at a road crossing. I had a sticker on the front fender from them indicating that I had hired them for my pits. They were mixed amongst all the other pro teams with their large trailers and pit crews and sponsors, but Baja Pits was as professional as ever. They were very much on top of it. No words had to be said. They ran up and took the cap off my fuel filler, plunged in the dry brake, and 5 seconds later I was full of fuel. Before I could even think, they had my pre-packed meal out and handed it to me. I don't remember what I ate, but it was probably something easy, just a bar or whatever I could eat nice and fast. And I would wash it down with some Gatorade. Any garbage and anything left over, they would just grab from me and I could take off. It was a very cool experience being the center of something like that and seeing spectators all around taking pictures. When I was ready to take off, it was a very good feeling, even having a short break like that. It wasn't too long after this that the first deviation came up. Motos and quads went one way, bypassing a good 55-mile section of the course, a way to help create that line of separation from the trucks and buggies. That deviation section was pretty fun terrain, classic ATV trail with lots of rolling hills and some steep rocky climbs. I made it to the meeting spot where I was to meet Marco, our driver. We told him about where we would look for him to get the pit stop set up. He was amongst all the other large pit crews for the trucks and others, but it wasn't too hard to find. I had to ask him about Brandon. I didn't know for sure with no communication, but I just had a feeling something had happened. Marco confirmed it when he told me Brandon did indeed crash out. He wasn't 100% sure how bad it was or the extent of the injury, but just that he was okay overall. I was very devastated to hear the news, just knowing his race was officially over. But that was only part of what happened to Brandon. He was delayed at the start of the race due to a rider having a very bad crash and getting knocked out, and a bad concussion. Brandon stopped and helped him for a good 20 minutes until he knew he was in good hands. Turns out this rider was on Jim O'Neill's team, and after the race, Jim's son contacted Brandon to send him some O'Neill riding gear and to say thank you for stopping to help their teammate.
Completely disoriented. Okay, I'm gonna I need you to trust me. I'm just gonna phone somebody. I'm not gonna alert anybody. Or
absolutely.
So Becky's your home.
Becky's my home. You can call. Where are we right now?
We're in the Baja.
In the Baja,
San
right?
Felipe.
What section are we in right now?
We're in the first section, man. Mile 15.
Okay, mile 15. Where did I get the bike?
So who is Mike Spurl?
I'm completely not Mike. No.
Justin.
Bob
Miodl.
Where did we start?
Bob Miodl.
Bob Miodl.
Miodl. I'm just gonna give him a call. It's all good, bud.
Okay.
You're not gonna get in shit, or I'm not gonna scare him. What's your name?
Robbie Schoberg.
Hey, my name's Brandon. I'm here with Robbie. What was it? Sorry. Schoberg. And he got smoked by a quad. Okay. So he's okay. He's okay, but he's dazed. Okay, like not really alert. So, but the bike is done. Okay. So we're at mile 15.5. Yeah, that's according to Stella, so however accurate that is. Okay, and his Stella is like in pieces. It's like fucked. So I can't even send a distress, or he's out kind of, or so. Yeah, he's dazed.
Well, he's an EMT.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe come take a look at him.
We're sweeping the court.
Oh, are you? Okay, right on.
Yep,
Yeah. Sorry, there's a medic here, so you can look at him.
Hello, sir. What's your name?
Robbie Schoberg. Yes.
Where are you from?
I'm from Cascade, California.
Okay. What are your problem?
Physically, I feel fine.
Yeah,
I'm
that
just taking out my quad.
like T-bone. I came off from somewhere. I don't even know where the fuck he came from.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm 757X. So
ding
yeah,
is
he
where
couldn't
I am right
put
now.
together.
Just gotta document stuff, so.
Yeah, I'm here, man. Yeah, physically he's fine.
Physically, I'm fine. That's the plan?
I think he got smoked. I think he like banged his
That's
head.
local.
Physically, I feel fine. Just dazed. They smashed me.
Okay.
I just, out of nowhere, just like that.
I need your water.
Huh?
I need water. The drink.
Are you guys okay?
My pack is right here. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna. You wanna talk to these guys or no?
Well, we'll stay with him for a while.
Yeah, they're taking care of him, but his bike is like a no-go.
We'll stay with him.
A couple of score guys. One is a medic. They're sweepers. So, they're good. All right, man. Sweet. Yeah, 15 point. I'll look at my Stella here. I don't know if it's yeah, 15.65. Yeah. So. Hey, man. No problem at all. I'm gonna get that phone back to them, okay? Okay, thanks, buddy. You're still on the phone. All right, you good?
Yeah, I'm coming too.
We'll stay with him for a while.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
No, don't even need to
We'll
thank
just
you
stick
for
with
that.
him for a minute so he doesn't. It's fine.
All right.
Keep telling him that where we're at.
Come to you
We're at
now.
mile marker 15. Adelante para control. Adelante para operaciones. Racer 2, por aquí se fue a una...
Now we'll go faster.
Yeah, there you go. Caída.
Thank you for
Did you get taken out by
Hey,
a
man.
quad?
No problem at all.
Yeah.
Glad you're okay.
Yeah, I'm so lucky I'm okay. I'm just kind of
That quad passed me first.
very disarranged. I just like
Well, we'll hang out with you for a while.
don't quite know my
You bearing.
logistics right
Yeah.
now.
Awesome. I gotta beat some trucks and shit.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Take it easy, buddy.
Okay, I
and,
will. I will.
I'll let him know.
Okay.
I was sure disappointed to hear the news, but I just had to keep focused on my own ride. I had a half sandwich with Marco and took off towards Mini Summit. This was where we started our first day of pre-riding. The pre-ride was also our first glimpse of the pre-runners, the milder trophy truck scouts, to check the course out. Still full beasts of a vehicle. The ride towards Mini Summit mellows out in a couple spots and isn't fully whooped out. They hadn't ran the race through Mini Summit in 25 years, so the course leading to the pass was a little smoother. I remembered the approach so I could see the hill coming and the narrow passage through it that is Mini Summit. It takes a short climb up through some relatively small boulders, then once you're at the top you can see the flat valley well below you through the canyon. This section is probably 6 kilometers long. During the descent, there are some spots with some very large boulders to climb up and over. Lots of caution needs to be taken through there to make sure the bike stays in one piece. When I was about 3/4 of the way through the descent, I came across a fellow Ironman rider, Christian Cuevas, 789X. He crashed really hard in Mini Summit and tore his starter button out, so he was trying to strip the wires to jump it. He didn't have pliers though, so I got my Leatherman and we stripped the wires. He was then able to jump it and fire up the bike, so he gave me a thumbs up and I took off. I looked back when I got to the bottom and noticed he was still quite a ways up there, but I just kept going. I didn't realize until after the race that he was also out of water. I would have known, since I had lots with me. I could have shared with him. But I heard when he made it out to the bottom, a spectator got him some water, so that was good to hear. The spectators at the Baja races are known for going there with full intentions to help out the racers. It's a big part of attending these kinds of events. My ride through Mini Summit went very smooth. Kept the bike upright the whole time, but there were many times the Charlie horses in my legs were about to spasm. When I would have a near tip over or long rough section where I had to stand and maneuver the bike, my legs would want to give out. I would have to stop and try to regroup and rest my legs for a short time. Once I was out of Mini Summit, the ride west of San Felipe went quite smooth. Fairly easy terrain, but lots of whoops and some spots with deep gravel sand. There is one hidden rock, which is what makes Baja famous. The rocks seem to be part of Earth's core, as one guy put it. These rocks are completely camouflaged in the sand, sitting up only a good couple inches proud, but the exact same color of the sand. And with the tire traveling through the sand a good couple inches, that's a nice hidden 4-inch step that can really kick you up. Handstands at 100 miles per hour is how Scott Harden puts it. Scott Harden interviewed us before the race over the phone, and just so happens he lives in Idaho Falls, so we made sure to meet up with him for lunch as we passed through. Scott Harden had quite the career in the motorcycle industry. He started racing in 1973 for Husqvarna and was the score overall champion in the 1978 Baja 1000. He has also won the Baja 500, Jerba 500 Rally, Best in the Desert, and the International 6 Days Enduro. He was also a rider and team manager of Red Bull KTM Dakar Rally teams in 2004 and 2005. He also held managerial and executive positions at Husqvarna, KTM, BMW, and Zero Motorcycles. So shortly after Mini Summit, I was enjoying the fast cruise through the sand when indeed one of those rocks appeared without me even seeing it, and it bucked the bike real hard, launching me off the seat a good foot or so. But luckily, at my conservative pace, it didn't send me right into a handstand. I kept the bike upright, only now I chose to stand for a bit in a safer, ready position. Besides that, most of this part of the course was just navigating the cactus, rocks, berms, and deep sand. Things were going quite smooth. I was comfortable with my pace, enjoying the ride, before I could even think to myself, I wonder when the first truck will hit. That's when it happened. With zero warning and not even able to hear a sound before they are next to you, the first truck blasted past me like an explosion. Full throttle, 1,000 horsepower screaming by, shooting up any 4-inch rock that it can grab with its 40-inch tires. Luke McMillan was far in the lead, making an incredible run. The San Felipe 250 is like a sprint for these trucks. 400 kilometers compared to 1,600 to 2,400 kilometers at the Baja 1000. The trucks were hitting a staggering average speed over the course of 65 miles per hour. I knew from that moment on my race was not the same. I was always told, in the San Felipe 250 especially, when the first truck passes you, you get off the course immediately. They said when the first place truck passes you, he usually has second place right on his tail. But that was not the case this time around. I pulled off the tracks and waited a good 2 minutes and nothing. So I kept going, then pulled over again and nothing again. So I kept going and was really hoping I would be able to tell when it got to me. But that was not the case. When second place got to me, it was around a left-handed sweeping corner, and with no warning at all, I was surprised by the truck riding the wall right beside me. He was at a 20-degree angle, only 2 feet beside me, bouncing his way past me at 35 miles per hour. That's when I pulled off, and was then not just scared, but genuinely concerned for my well-being. He could have easily bounced off into me, or more likely, me lose my balance and have me slide my bike sideways towards the truck. I knew then on for sure I had to play it safe as best I could. There was no easy answer. Not even the chase helicopters were able to give me a warning for the top trucks. I had to keep rolling, and I couldn't hear them approach. So I'd ride hard and fast to try to get as much through as I could, and when a good spot came up, I would pull over and turn the bike off and see if I could hear anyone coming. Most of the time it didn't help anything, but every once in a while the timing would work and I could hear someone approaching from a ways back. The top trophy trucks did not bother to use the Stella Pass button, but I think I understand why. At the speeds they are coming at me, I would appear to be nearly a standing object, so as soon as it was clear enough, they would be able to pass me without me even having time to react. Now, if I were to get the pass indication, they would have to wait for me to hear the beep, then choose a side of the track to get out of. And some of the corners had large berms, built up to 3 feet high, which makes it hard to climb up and out on a bike in a panic. There was a spot that was coming up that I was concerned about with the trucks approaching behind me, and that was the narrow slot canyon, only big enough for one truck to fit through. A tight S-turning canyon with deep sand in it, followed by a steep climb out. I knew there was no way I could crash in there and expect a top truck team with millions of dollars invested to just wait for me to pick my bike back up. I knew if I tipped over in there, they would just climb right over the bike and keep going. So I had to just stop and listen for the trucks before the canyon, and when I felt I couldn't hear one coming, I just went for it. Rode hard and fast and kept it as stable as I could, which really burnt the legs, compensating the balance of the bike with the washout of the sand. I could feel my legs starting to light on fire every time I dabbed my foot down to keep balance, and as soon as I felt that burn, I heard it behind me. The echo through the canyon, I could feel it in my chest as a truck reached the canyon entrance. I knew that was it. There was no stopping or slowing down. I had to make it out of the canyon before it reached me, since there was nowhere to even pull over and let it past. The sound was getting louder and louder, and just when my legs were about to give out, I seen the canyon wall and the trail up and out. One last push of the legs to keep the bike balanced, and I made it out. As soon as I got to a clear spot, I pulled over and jumped off the bike as my legs were ready to Charlie horse, both of them. They were as hard as bricks. No more than 20 seconds after I jumped off the bike, the Red Bull chase helicopter crested over the knoll, sideways, followed by another chopper shortly behind it. 5 seconds later, the thunder of the truck comes out into the open as it shoots out of the canyon. All I see is the bottom of the truck as it bursts out in a cloud of gravel and dust. It howls as it hits the accelerator, finally being back in the open and out of the canyon. It screamed its way towards me. 2 helicopters pass, then 20 seconds later, another truck follows it, and I watch them fly past me in a fury. 20 more seconds and it's dead silent. Just a fog of dust lingering in the air. I get a good long drink of water and an energy gel and wait for my legs to relax a little. I'm ready to keep rolling. Not all of the passing was like putting my life in their hands. A lot of the lesser teams would just end up passing in a large open track or wash, and we would have a good comfortable distance between us. And that's when I felt that feeling of why Baja is famous for this experience. When you're riding at 40 miles per hour in an open wash and a truck comes up and passes you at a respectable distance and speeds of 60 miles per hour, fishtails in front of you back into the track and kicks up fist-sized boulders towards you. You get a real Mad Max feeling as you grit your teeth from the debris, let out a holler, and throttle right into it. Something no other race can give you. A lot of the wider washes, I would ride a ways off course to try to keep out of the way of the vehicles, but sometimes that came back to bite me. I would end up approaching a washout or something I would have to navigate around, or bushes of cacti I couldn't make it past. So I'd have to travel right sideways as best I could towards the track. Going backwards on the course was an automatic DQ, so I had to make sure to keep it moving forward and not get caught going back in the GPS. I never did have to backtrack anywhere. Closest I ever did was just get sideways. Some of the course would open up into large washes with lots of tracks to choose from, and you had lots of freedom for which track to hit. On the GPS files we were given, it showed where each virtual checkpoint was placed, and when you got within 25 feet of it, you would get an audible 2 beeps from the Stella telling you that you hit the checkpoint. Once most of the top trophy trucks were passed, the other 4-wheel categories started to show up, like the top Baja buggy teams, and lots of these vehicles would press the pass indicator and wait for me to pull over. Most of these vehicles also had sirens, just like emergency vehicles, and they would blow the siren as well as let you know they were behind you. So when you heard the siren, you moved off the course as quick as you could. I managed to keep it upright for all of the times I got pass indications. A short while later, I made it to a very wide open flat part of the valley, and things felt a little too exposed out there. Something was telling me I had to take caution in there. So I was pulling over frequently, and it was a good thing I did. The trucks were going well over 200 kilometers an hour through there, flat out. I was very unsure where a safe spot would be. I was told to get way off course, but I had in my mind, if I were to go off course behind the bushes and they somehow got knocked off course, they would just plow through the bushes down and run me over, and not even know it. I wanted to remain visible, but this was maybe not the answer either. At the speeds they were coming, I know I spooked a couple of the trucks, with the nose diving down with a quick brake check as soon as they spotted me. The speeds they were going through there, I know there was no way I could ride in front of them. They would have a hard time slowing down before hitting me if I were on the course, so I just did my old strategy. I would pull over and look for dust way up the valley, then take off and ride as quickly as I could, then pull over and check for dust again. The first sign of dust, as far as I could see away, still meant they were approaching me in less than 30 seconds. It was a very fast section, and very cool to hear the trucks go past from the sidelines. The next part of the course coming up was the part I was actually most worried about. I found it more difficult than Mini Summit. This was a seasonal wash called Boulder Canyon. Some of the parts of this track required you to climb up and over some piles of 2-foot diameter rocks to the next step up. It was starting to get very hot, and at this part of the day it felt even hotter in the canyon. I wasn't going very fast with all the times I had to pull over, so I wasn't getting much airflow either. As I was going through there and trying to balance up and over the boulders, the inevitable was happening. The bike kept tipping over, and I was getting very fatigued from picking it back up. I was very hot and very thirsty, and when I got to one large boulder pile, I noticed why it was so hard to navigate the boulders compared to pre-run. The 2-foot boulders had been lifted out of the sand from the trophy trucks grabbing them and rolling them out as they throttle over them. This one pile I was trying to get up and over was an obvious tough spot with a large tent set up and a crew sitting there with a tow strap to help vehicles get up and over the rocks. I tipped the bike over 3 times trying to get it up and over, and was gassed right out when the guys came over to help me out. As we got the bike upright, we heard a group of vehicles approaching up the canyon. They hollered for me to get the bike up and rolling, and with a burst of adrenaline, I pushed the bike up and over the last couple of big rocks, hopped on with my clutch hand nearly giving out as it was pumped so bad. I rode it off course and parked it so I could catch my breath, as 2 or 3 vehicles went past right as I hopped off the bike. The crew in the tent came over to me and they told me to go sit under the tent. They got me some M&M's beef jerky and a sports drink out of the cooler and sat me down in a chair in the shade. They could tell I was fatigued. The timing couldn't have worked out better because I sat there and a steady stream of vehicles came through. I watched as probably 20 vehicles went past, trophy trucks and spec trucks, while I drank in the shade. I'm convinced this saved my race. If I was caught out there in the heat having to watch the vehicles go by, I would have been in pretty rough shape with no real rest or shade. This was a spot I know gave me a lot of concern for those back home. Everyone at home was following the race with a live tracker on the Score website. They could refresh the page and give a readout on the map of where every race vehicle was on the course. They had seen when I went past Christian Cuevas, and then the first trophy truck made it to me, and now they see I haven't moved in 25 minutes. I know a few people were growing concerned with how long I sat. Could be anything for all they know, but eventually I knew it was time to go. No way of knowing when more vehicles would come. I would just have to keep rolling. So I got geared back up, filled my Camelback, and took off down the trail. The vehicles that were passing me were now much more tame, and the course was winding. I would get an alarm siren and pull over very quick and let them pass. Things were going steady for a little while now, and then not long after Boulder Canyon, the second deviation came up. It was such a massive relief, knowing from here to the finish line, it was going to be just me, alone, no more trucks or four-wheel vehicles. And being one of the last bikes, I knew it was going to be a quiet ride. It was also a spot for the second last pit stop, so I got my fuel and they gave me a banana and I was off. I had some relief knowing it was just me, but the whoops made it anything but easy. The whoops after Boulder Canyon were incredibly deep and full of rocks, but I could see the end of the valley and knew I just had to make it out there, and then I would get to ride my favorite part of the ride. the wide open flat wash called Matomi Wash. It was a beautiful wash with wide open flat sand and straight vertical tall canyon sides all around you. I loved riding through there with the sun setting a little lower, creating nice shadows in the canyon walls. Our second day of pre-riding went through here too. We rode through Boulder Canyon and Matomi Wash. About 15 kilometers before Matomi was also where Brandon had a light tip over on his bike, but ended up being a very worrying experience. He was riding the deep coarse sand and hit a corner funny, and it tipped his bike over. We didn't think anything of it until he stood his bike up and noticed a stream of coolant coming out from the radiator. The bike ended up tipping over onto a large dome-shaped rock and crushed the radiator real bad, and a kink in the joint cracked open. Brandon was devastated. It was getting late and he wasn't sure how the bike would be for getting back to Marco. It was waiting on the highway. We would ride a little ways and he would check the temperature and see if the bike was overheating or leaking severely. Things appeared okay, but a new race day was on his mind. I kept playing around in the sand, doing large fishtails on corners. Usually Brandon would be doing the same, but he was riding steady and straight. He was very worried about how on earth he could fix his bike 3 days leading up to the race. We made it to Marco with lots of relief and laughter, as we were very tired from the ride and happy to have made it out to the truck. But the laughter was short-lived, as Marco was very worried himself. He told us we needed to load up the bikes and get moving to San Felipe sooner than later. He did not like being alone on that highway sitting there in a brand new beautiful 2023 GMC truck. As the evening went on, he drove the truck more and more into the bush to hide himself from traffic passing by. Once we got into the truck and on our way, he told us of the time he got his vehicle stolen from him at gunpoint. They even shot at the ground in front of him. So then we understood the concern he had for sitting there for hours in the evening. Once we got back to our room and unloaded the bikes, Brandon got on social media right away to ask around the Pro Moto Baja page to see if anyone knows of any way to help him out in fixing his bike. San Felipe is a very small town with no place to get any parts from. The only place to get parts is a race team or another bike. Well, luck was sure on Brandon's side, as the graciousness of Tim Morton with Baja Bound Adventures. He has a fleet of bikes to rent out for customers for pre-running, or just for tours. Well, one of those bikes indeed happened to be the same as Brandon's, a Honda CRF 450L. And Tim said it actually has a separate issue and isn't going to be used in the following week. So Tim contacted his part supplier and asked them if he would be able to get a radiator in time for his tour, which they could. So everything ended up falling well into place. We brought Brandon's bike over and they were heading out for a tour that morning, the last day of pre-riding. So they let us change the radiator right at the hotel parking lot and leave all the parts under the donor bike and install the new radiator in Brandon's bike. It was such a fun, uplifting moment, seeing the pieces all come together and knowing Brandon was for sure able to race, which was 2 days away. He took his bike up for a car wash and we were back in business. Riding through Matomi Wash was a lot of fun for me on race day. I was alone, weather was cooling off a little, and I could lean the bike over and just surf the bike through the deep sand. The best part of this ride was knowing Marco was going to be waiting at the highway for me, our second meet spot. I made it out to him and he gave me another sandwich for me. He gave me an update on Brandon and gave me my Métis sash to tie around my waist to wear over the finish line, if I were to make it there. This was also a spot I was looking forward to because it was the longest speed zone, as this part of the course was on the highway. We couldn't go over 60 miles per hour. Right after Marco was also my last pit stop, last fuel before the finish. I pulled in, I got the fill up, and they wished me luck and told me I got this. I can make it to the end, and I took off. I didn't need any snacks as I just got them from Marco, so I headed down the highway, riding right at 59 miles per hour. Any vehicle going slower, I would just pull out and pass them. Very cool part of the race, being out in the open highway. I thought in my head, this is going to be a breeze. I convinced myself the last push was going to be easy. I only had 45 miles to go. Piece of cake. But then I seen where the course went off the highway. It was hard to tell. It looked as though a lot of the flagging had been taken down, and no one was around. As soon as I got on the quad trail off the highway, I was brought right back down to earth. It was nasty. Whooped out like everywhere else, but full of large boulders in the bottom of each whoop. I got knocked around many times riding this section and really had to grit my teeth. I was yelling in my helmet to keep it under control as I hit the large boulders. This kept up for another nasty 2 hours. When I left Marco, he said on the highway it's about an hour drive back to San Felipe. I kept an eye on my time on the Stella device and knew it was going to be very close to make it to the finish in under 14 hours. The sun getting lower and lower, and the time getting closer. This was starting to feel like a video game. I was riding alone in the middle of a massive expanse. Sun getting near the horizon, and the clock I had to race. There were no spectators out there. It was just me racing the sun and the time. As I was getting closer to town, there were a couple spots that I wasn't sure which way to go. The signs might have been ripped apart. One spot I was very concerned about. We got into an opening in the fence, and I couldn't tell if I was supposed to be on the left or right of the fence. It was a 50-50 gamble. So I just made a choice and went for it. About 2 kilometers after that, I noticed a couple signs on the other side of the fence. I started to freak out, wondering if I was going the wrong way and was going to get corralled into a corner surrounded by barbed wire. But I just kept rolling along with it, my fingers crossed. And sure enough, there was a spot with a fence down, so I rode the bike over the wire and was back on the right side of the fence. The trails around this part now were more fun. Just very loose sand with rolling hills up and over each crest. Typical ATV trails and much less rocks. The sun was right on the horizon now, and every time I headed west, it was right in my eyes and was very hard to see. It took another 10 minutes and the sun was gone. Darkness was coming fast. It started with that part of dusk that's very hard to see. The ground is dark, but the sky is still bright, so it blinds you as to the ground and makes it very hard to see. And to make matters worse, my GPS just gave me a low battery warning. Part of the course also went right up beside the highway, which was full of traffic now. Everyone was leaving the desert and heading for the finish line to watch everyone rolling in. I was riding at race pace, right in the dirt, on the shoulder of the road, with cars on both sides of the road. This was about 4 kilometers. Then it kicked me back out into the desert, but still near town. I was close enough to town now I could see vehicles and spectators around. Lots of spectators' vehicles driving on the course, trying to make their way out. I would just have to ride up and around them, most of them trying hard to get out of the way. But this is where things started to get tricky. My GPS just lost all battery and it turned off. I had no way of following a course. I had to rely on the markings on the ground. But that was near impossible, as I noticed another thing. The markers are just paper, so there's no reflection on them. Things got very tough to navigate, as I had no GPS and the vehicles traveling in all directions. There was a good couple times I had to stop and yell at spectators to ask if I was going in the right direction. They would cheer and holler and point me in the right way. I did this about 3 times, as there were tracks everywhere and the arrows were impossible to see unless my headlight was right on it. I could feel my body panic, as I knew how close to victory I was, but it could be lost at any time if I went on a wrong turn. I also noticed the dirt was starting to change. I had made it to the famous deep flour dirt you hear about from all these races. The light, fluffy flour that can swallow your bike wheel up to its axle. It was full throttle going up a couple of the hills, and downhill was much worse as the front wheel wanted to just wash right out. Less than an hour to go now, and I had to just keep things steady and not get lost. The course went away from a bit of the traffic, and I just had to pin it through the flower. This is where I had my worst crash of the race, but luckily it was in the softest terrain. I hit a slight rise, and the flower took the wheel out and just turned it in another direction, and instead of where I wanted to go, it sent me right over top the handlebars into the dirt, and I got a nice face full of the light fluffy dirt. I quickly got up, and no time to spare, I spit out all the dirt in my mouth and rinsed it out with my water and hit the trail. Navigating here was a little easier without the traffic, and then I made it to the bridge where I went onto the road. I knew that was it. I was inside of the town limits now. I knew I would be approaching shortly, and sure enough, I went around the corner after the underpass, and the dunes outside of our villa were lined up with UTVs and trucks with lights on, watching everyone come in. I was a kilometer from the finish line. The crowds at the finish line were massive. A lot different from the early morning takeoff. I could tell the party was rolling into the evening after the trucks and the top bikes finished hours ago. Right after the dunes, that was it. I hit the streets and through the barricade, 2 more corners, people on all sides cheering as I rolled in. I came around the corner and I could see the finish. I rolled under the transponder tower and through the checkered flag, and there it was. I made it through. I made it to the finish. I checked my time and I couldn't believe it. I was 45 minutes from the 14-hour cutoff time. It was a relief and an excitement I have never felt before. I made it to the end in time. I'm going to get an Ironman medal. There was a buggy in front of me on the stage getting their interview after the ride. I took off my helmet and did my best to wipe away the dried dust and drool from my face. I had dirt in every part of my body and mouth. I looked over at the crowd as I was wiping myself down and could hear everyone's uplifting words congratulating me. I thanked them. Then it was my turn to ride up on the stage. I rode the bike up there, the beautiful 2007 Honda 450X that rode non-stop for 13 hours with not one single issue. I got my interview and they put my medal around my neck. I couldn't believe it. This is what I came here for, that medal, to finish. It was the hardest ride I have ever done. Dangers all along the way. It all hit hard after the interview when they let me down the ramp and opened the gates into the crowds. Strangers from all around surrounded me and patted me on my back and told me how awesome it was that I finished. I knew there was something special about when I came in. I don't think they had seen a bike in a while, and I think they knew I was probably the last bike to ride over the finish line, so they gave me a lot of special attention. It was a very surreal moment, and one I will cherish forever. My next task was to go right to Stella to return the Stella device so they could upload my data needed. So I did that, then rode through the streets with my helmet in my arm, my medal around my neck. But all I could think about was seeing Brandon, seeing how he was feeling, and to share the experience of our day together. I was in such a high moment, I could barely contain it. I pulled up to our villa and turned off the bike. The door was open, so I just glanced around the corner and started laughing. I couldn't contain it. Brandon didn't know for sure if I finished, so I showed him the medal. He was so happy for me and said how he wished he could be at the finish line. But I could see the pain he was in. He was laying on the bed, broken collarbone, dislocated shoulder, and 2 broken ribs. I told him to not worry about not making it down there. We had some good laughs talking about the day we had just experienced. Brandon told me about his accident. This is what he told me.
Oh my God.
The locals were amazing. Right after the crash, I thought to myself, damn, there's no one around. Then they started coming from everywhere. It was so incredible. One guy came over with a beer, a lady came over with a chair, others were checking me out. Some were trying to put pieces back on the bike. One guy was trying to contact our chase truck, and others were dealing with the Stella. It was like nothing I've ever experienced. Within 10 minutes of realizing my race was over, I was in a chair with a beer, a burrito, and wearing a sombrero, watching the trophy trucks rip by with my new friends. Best day ever. I may have crashed and not finished, but I tried. I'm proud of my effort, and I'm thankful for the experience. Thanks to all those who supported my dream. Brandon told me as well about how he helped that Team O'Neill rider, and that when he got back on the bike, he was in a panic to catch up, and was riding closer to 95% than the 75% he planned to ride. And that's how it happened. He was at a fast pace and came over one of the whoops and was getting ready to pull over for a snack, and that roller ended up having a pile of rocks in the bottom of it. He hit it hard, bending his rim, and it sent him over the bars onto his shoulder. I put my phone on the charger in the room and started it up to see what I got for messages, and that was the most enjoyable experience, going through the hundreds of messages from everyone back home who were following that day. It was overwhelming, the love and support from everyone at home. Reading every one of those and responding to those that I could respond to. It was so enjoyable. That's about when I noticed what my body was doing. It could not sit still. It would spasm about every 4 seconds, just go tense and release. It wasn't so much of a muscle issue as a mental issue. My body could not stop working. I was just going tense over and over as I imagined the whoops in my head, like feeling the sea after a day on the boat. I was feeling the whoops for hours after the race. After I sent some messages, I went and had the best shower as I washed off all the sweat and grime and just reflected on the day to myself. What an adventure. What a wild ride. 13 hours of non-stop adventure. The terrain I got to see, the abuse my body put up with, the vehicles I got to ride beside at race pace, and experience them on the same course. That led up to this moment, the preparation. From that moment at Fat Burger, when Brandon told me he was going to race in Baja and was wondering if I wanted to come along, which progressed from being his pit crew to then deciding to go down to Rocky Mountain House to buy the 450X. Then the months of getting the bikes ready, getting sponsors for the race, modifying the bikes, adding decals and hard parts, changing the tires. I spent many hours in Brandon's garage. We sure had a lot of help to make this a once-in-a-lifetime trip happen. Our sponsors were such a major help. We were very fortunate for them, as they made this entire thing possible. And most of all, the love and support from those that are close to me to help me live out a dream, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It will be with me forever.
weeks earlier, so.
Okay. Another surgery?
Yeah, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago. Okay.